So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to say welcome to our edible gardening series. I believe this is number 5 of our weeks. So my name's Carol White Evans, and I'm the Chemicals and the Environment Agent here at the Extension in Sarasota County. I'm joined by my co-worker, Sarah Bostic, who's our Sustainable Ag Agent. Our colleague, Mindy, who also helps us on these, is actually out on leave right now, but we're hoping that she'll be back fairly soon. Also wanted to mention our communications guru, Kevin, who does an amazing job of getting these videos posted for us on a weekly basis. But again, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So if you want to revisit any of these in the next couple of weeks, you may have to wait a little bit. Maybe that'll be your Christmas vacation video watching. So we've also started a weekly blog. I did miss it last week. I apologize, but we will have one this week, as well as the resource list that Sarah will be sending out. So I want to just say thank you for joining this series. It's offered every Monday from noon to about 12:30. This week's topic is beneficial insects. I'll spend the first 10 minutes discussing this topic, and then we'll open it up for questions. So depending on how many people end up joining us, which I see we have quite a few, if you have a question, go ahead and enter it during that 10 minutes, and that question could be anything. Just enter it into the chat box, and then Sarah's going to be monitoring that chat box for those questions. Any questions that we don't actually get to by the end of this session, we will follow up in a email sent out. So let's get going. So sustainable pest control, gardening the old-fashioned way. So beneficial insects is our topic of the day. We've heard from many people that they were really good at gardening, either when they were living in a different state, but once they moved to Florida, all of a sudden, what happened? They lost that green thumb. Also, people who live here, and I'm one of those. I've been here since, I believe, 2003, and I still have yet to be able to put together a successful garden. Even though I know all the steps, my timing as a California girl is always off. I guess that it's that California in me that is always messing it up. So this series grew out of that need for the community, for more information on gardening and specifically gardening in Florida. So being Extension, we just decided it was great to put together some sort of a series like this so that we can extend our knowledge out to our community. So with that, so today we're talking about something that is guaranteed to be in your garden, and that's insects. When gardening, we sometimes feel like the bugs take over, and in some cases they really have. But when you look closely, you most likely do have an army of silent soldiers for you that are helping to control those pest insects. So what we're talking about is the presence of beneficial insects that are both in and around your garden. So if you joined us a few weeks ago, the topic was sustainable pest control. We discussed the best and most sustainable way to gardening, or really any situation where pests can be an issue, and that was the use of integrated pest management, or IPM. One component of IPM is focused on beneficial insects, and more specifically utilizing natural enemies of those pests in your garden as biological control agents. So insects are by far the most diverse species in the animal kingdom. Scientists have discovered over 1 million species of insects in the world. And if you think of that as that number in the world, they make up more than half of the known living organisms on the planet. So we are really overrun with insects, but in a good way. In the United States, there are over 91,000 identified species, and here in Florida we have over 13,000 identified insect species. So Florida has more insect species than all of the other 49 states combined, and that's because of our tropical climate. And although the thought of 13,000 insect species here in Florida might be a little intimidating, it's really impressive, and on a good note, only 1% of those are actually pest insects. The other 99% are either beneficial in one way or another, or they're just innocuous. Insects serve as the diet staple for many of our birds and bats, lizards, snakes, and small mammals, such as like rodents, armadillos and raccoons. So although you may not want those things in your garden, you have to remember that food chain. Plants are our primary producers, which are eaten by primary consumers, which are the insects or arthropods. And then those primary consumers are then eaten by secondary consumers, which are in turn eaten by our tertiary consumers, and so it goes. So insects play a huge role in that movement of energy and the recycling of nutrients in the environment as on a whole. So it's really important to have insects around. With that said, in commercial agriculture, that 1% of insects that are truly pests destroy about 20% of our human food production annually. So you can extrapolate that back to your own garden. And the reality is that those few insect pests that are around can really do damage to your garden. So just a brief reminder about the components of IPM, the 5 basic components: identification, monitoring, scouting, decision-making, and intervention and evaluation. And pointing out that biological control falls under one of those components and under the intervention component. And addressing specifically the importance of pest identification. What is it and what stage is it? Being able to answer these 2 questions is really important to be able to address the issues, or if there's really an issue in your garden or in your landscape. A sidebar on that, and I'll tell you about pest identification. Just last week, I had a customer call me in a panic that she had all these spiky looking insects all over her palm. I told her, don't do anything, just bring in the insect for identification before she thought that she needed to go to a chemical control. Well, she brought them in, and what it ended up being was those were all the pupal form of a twice-stabbed lady beetle. So a twice-stabbed lady beetle is the black lady beetle that has red spots on the top of its thorax. So had she applied a chemical control to those crazy looking spiky insects, she would have killed all of those beneficial insects, all of that biocontrol that was helping her with whatever pest insect that's there. So I was able to tell her that she now needs to look for some smaller piercing sucking insect that's probably on the bottom of the frond. So that's just one example of why it's really important to do a proper pest identification before you think you need to control the situation. Another thing about pests is or insects is knowing the life stage of both the pest insect as well as the beneficial insect. This will assist you with knowing if it is a beneficial or a pest insect and if controls are needed, such as using these biorational pesticides. You'll have more success treating the younger, the smaller stage of an insect than you will trying to control an adult stage or a later larval stage. So the 2 types of insect growth and development are complete and incomplete metamorphosis. Incomplete metamorphosis just has 3 stages. I promise I'll go through this quick. It just has 3 stages. It's an egg, a nymph, and an adult. So we have egg, nymph, and adult. And the nymph basically is a mini-me of the adult. It looks almost identical to the adult, except for it just doesn't have wings. Insects that go through incomplete metamorphosis are things like cockroaches and crickets and chinch bugs, mole crickets as well, and grasshoppers. The important thing about incomplete metamorphosis is that both the adult, both the adult and the larval stage or nymph stage eat the same thing. This is important when it comes to figuring out how to control the particular insect. And there are usually multiple generations of these insects on the same leaf at the same time. So when you do need to control them, they're all there at that same time. Complete metamorphosis has 4 stages. So it's the egg, the larvae, the pupa, and then the adult. The larval stage is very different from the adult stage. It looks completely different. And that's kind of how I remember the difference between complete and incomplete, is that the larval stage of a complete insect looks completely different. Some of these insects that have complete metamorphosis are things that we know, like butterflies and moths, beetles, so our lady beetles, and lacewings. And a lot of those are really good natural enemies, and they are all beneficial. The ones, at least the ones I just talked about. Immature stages are usually more destructive than adults when you're thinking of pest insect. It's also important to know that the immature stages of predatory insects eat more pest insects than the adult stage. And that's kind of a generalization. And I'll tell you about the number of like lady beetles, how many aphids they can eat in a little bit. So hopefully you see the importance of being able to identify both the immature and the adult stage of these insects. You know, sometimes they don't look anything like the adult, and you don't want to kill those because they're more than likely going to be a beneficial insect. So almost every insect serves a purpose. Many of them are considered beneficial insects, meaning they offer some sort of a benefit or help, and very few are actually pest insects or bad bugs. So we were talking about that 1%. The insects in our landscape and our garden are mostly beneficial, and we can actually separate these even down into further buckets. And those buckets are pollinators, detritivores or decomposers, and then predators and parasitoids. So our pollinators or beneficials, we have our insects that pollinate crops or vegetables and fruits that we rely on as food, as well as the flowers, you know, pollinating the flowers in our backyard. The pollinating part is actually a bonus for us. During pollination, the insect is actually collecting pollen and nectar for either the individual or for the colony as a whole. And it depends on what the insect is of whether it's actually eating that pollen or just collecting that pollen. Besides pollinating our plants, we also get the benefit from some of their resources that they provide, right? Something like honey. So our pollinators are good in multiple ways. But when it comes to pollinator impact, 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat is the result of a pollinator by a honeybee. So it's incredibly important to us for sustaining our food crop, and also incredibly important about when we're trying to apply control measures that we're not negatively impacting our pollinators. Other pollinators that are common are butterflies, moths, flies, and some beetles. Again, pollinators are considered beneficial insects. They're not natural enemies. So detritivores, another bucket of beneficial insects are these detritivores. These insects are soil dwellers, and they act as basically like the world's cleaners. Their job is to help break down organic matter in the ground that is then further broken down by microbial action. So the stuff that's left over, the smaller particles are then broken down by microbial action. Ground beetles can be either detritivores or predatory beetles, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. Millipedes are another really good detritivore, but one, especially right now, which people either hate or they are freaked out over, thinking that they're centipedes. This year seems to be a banner year for millipedes. I do agree, but just know that they're helping us in our environment by breaking down this organic material is important to keep in the back of your mind that you really don't want to kill them. If you don't want them coming in your house, try to keep the area in front of your doorways free of like moisture. So especially moist, thick mulch, because that's where they live. That's where they reproduce. That's where their eggs are. So if you keep that farther away, you're gonna minimize. I won't say eliminate, but you're gonna minimize the number of millipedes that are coming in your house. Other detritivores are things like springtail and woodlice. These are really small insects that we typically can't see with our naked eye, but they're incredibly productive decomposers for their size. I mean, they're tiny. Slugs and snails are also considered decomposers or detritivores, but we know they are quite destructive to our gardens because they also eat our plants. So, I'm not putting them in a good bug category by any means, but they are decomposers. And like millipedes will on occasion nibble on your plants, but millipedes are not responsible for taking out any of your new plants. So now we get to the set of beneficial insects that help keep pest insects in check, and that's our biological control agents. So these are the existing natural enemies of pest insects that are already in the area and help with natural pest control. You can also purchase many of these natural enemies, but it's really best to try and conserve the ones that are already present in the garden. But definitely take advantage of biological control whenever you can. So opportunity is there, and they're there whether you see them or not. There are many different types of biocontrols for the garden, but the three main categories of natural enemies are predators and generalists. They eat just about anything that comes across their path. Parasitoids, these are mainly wasps and flies, and they're usually host specific, but an incredible and freaky source of pests or biocontrol. And then naturally occurring pathogens. These are entomopathic fungi, bacteria, or viruses, as well as nematodes. I'm not going to address these today, but I just wanted you to make sure that you are aware that there are these pathogenic organisms that are beneficial in the garden. They are there naturally occurring, but you also can apply them as a chemical control agent, and specifically a microbial pesticide. So you can buy these things and spray them on your plants or on the soil. So they are a great source of biocontrol. So our predators. The next two buckets are considered biological control insects, right? So they're the predators and the parasitoids. This is a very specific group, so that sort of are like the police of the insect world, if you want to think of it that way. They keep pest insects such as like your small soft-bodied insects like scale and aphid and mealybug and whitefly. They keep them in check, and this is really important, especially in agriculture, because these sucking, piercing insects, so your aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, these can do really serious harm in the garden because they vector diseases into our crops. Chewing pests do a lot of damage, right? They do a lot of chewing damage, but they do not transmit diseases. So you really have to pay attention more to your sucking, piercing insects. Predators, these are all generalists. They feed on anything that they can catch, but that also includes they will feed on other biological controls, right? So you can see a praying mantis eat a ladybug, and it's just part of the system, right? But this bucket includes things like praying mantids, predatory beetles, which includes our ladybugs, lacewings, which you usually see the larval stage out during the day, but you usually don't ever see the adult lacewing. This is green lacewing, because they're nocturnal, so they come out at night. And then the other one is spiders. Even though spiders aren't insects, they're arachnids, which is an arthropod, but spiders are fabulous. All spiders, all they eat is insects. So they are a great source of biocontrol. Praying mantids, they're a sit and wait type of predator. So they're very, very quick. They will be stationary, and then the minute something comes along, they can snatch it, whether it's crawling or flying, and they have these grasping, really awesome legs that hold on to that insect, and then they eat it right away. And that's the other thing about these types of insects, these predators. As they come across insects, they eat them as they go. And then the ladybugs or lady beetles are the other ones I was telling you about. The immature stage of a lady beetle, which this is this alien-looking creature, is the larval stage of a lady beetle, can eat up to 400 aphids during its transition from an egg into the pupal stage. And then an adult ladybug over her lifetime can eat up to 5,000 aphids. So, it's an incredible source of biocontrol. They can eat 5,000 aphids in its lifetime. So in the meantime, it's laying eggs, right? And it's having, its eggs are hatching out. So you're having even more biocontrol. If you then use a chemical source to control that pest insect, you may be then also eliminating all of this wonderful free biocontrol. So I wanted to throw this up real quick because I always get this question. How do you tell the difference between a predatory stink bug and a beneficial stink bug? Well, these are all beneficial stink bugs on this side, and these are all pest stink bugs over here. And if you notice, this is kind of a generalization. I won't say this is the only way to tell, but it's a generalization. Look at the top of this is the thorax, and these have a very rounded, smooth edge to them. Leaf-footed bugs are a little different. They do have pointies, but leaf-footed bugs, they're all bad. They all eat your plants and the fruit. But most of them have this real general, gradual area around their thorax. Where you look at predatory stink bugs, this is hard to see, but they all have, it comes to a point. Like here on the spiny soldier bug, you can see this point. So that's one real general way. There's another one to tell that it's a predatory stink bug versus a pest stink bug. This is the larval stage. Both of these three are larval stages because they don't have wings yet. They only have wing buds. So just wanted to show you a general way of telling. Basically, what the best way to do though is to send me a picture, and I can tell you that way. I can ID it out and then let you know. So now on to the parasitoids. So these are normally, parasitoids are usually wasps, but they also can be some flies. But I love, parasitoids are just the most coolest form of biocontrol. Parasitoids like this, what they do is this, what this is now an adult, the adult will lay an egg inside of the aphid. So what they do is they lay it inside of the aphid. It then hatches inside that living aphid. It eats the aphid from the inside out. It pupates. It'll cut a round circular hole in the back of the abdomen of the aphid, and then this adult merges. Now, these guys are usually very host specific and even stage specific. They usually will have to have a young aphid in order to parasitize because it has to have time to grow. But here's the thing, how you know that you have these parasitoids around, because these guys are really small. They look like little gnats. You don't know the difference. But what you do is you look for these brown aphids. This is called a mummified aphid. So this is an aphid mummy. This is one, you can see how brown it is. Normally they're green or orange, right? But when they're brown like this, it means that they've been parasitized. If you have one brown aphid amongst a sea of green aphids, just know that you probably have a lot more that have been parasitized, right? It just takes time for that parasitoid to grow inside that aphid and hatch out. So if you see one brown mummified aphid, don't do anything. Just let nature do its work, okay? Because this is really, they'll still walk around when they're parasitized, but they usually stop feeding, and they're really considered kind of, you can call them the walking dead because they're no longer feeding, and they're just a matter of time before they actually completely die, and that parasitoid hatches out. Another form is like a yellow jacket. These yellow jackets are solitary, and they live in the ground. They are not like the paper wasps that make a wasp nest up on the eaves of your house. They don't lay eggs inside of the insect, but what they do is they sting the insect, and it's usually a caterpillar that they eat. So they'll sting this caterpillar, and it paralyzes it. Doesn't kill the insect or the caterpillar. And then they carry that caterpillar back to their den, their nest in the ground, where they have laid eggs. And the eggs are either laid in there or they lay it along the side of this caterpillar. And then that larval form of this wasp will then eat that caterpillar. So overall, keep in mind, all of these natural enemies take time to show up, and then they take time to do the work on getting that insect under control. So predators eat insects on the spot, but parasitoids lay eggs, and then those eggs hatch, and then they do their job, right? So just know that you have to give any biocontrol time to work. So if you start treating these infestations without knowing that the beneficials are in the area, or that they're already parasitized, you'll be killing off a lot of those natural enemies and shifting that power to the pest insects in the long term, because that pest insect's going to really, their generational times are a lot quicker than the predatory insect times. So just know that they will do the job. Sometimes they need a little help, but just know if you can find them around, they do the job. So with that, just wanted to point back out that monitoring, making sure you know what's in your garden. This should happen on especially in your garden, on more than a biweekly, like a biweekly schedule, twice a week at least, because those, you get an aphid in your garden, they can reproduce in a matter of days and just overcome, right? And then also the fact that we feed our gardens, what we're doing is we're making that garden so just, the best buffet in the world to those pest insects, because we're putting a lot of nutrients into those plants to make those plants grow and produce. So those all those nutrients in that plant are bringing in those pest insects. So another reason why you need to keep an eye on your gardens more than maybe your ligustrum out in your landscape. And then chemical controls. If you need to use chemical controls, biorational pesticides are the ones to use. These are a broad range of low impact environmental products. They are part of an IPM program, but only use them as a last resort. They're still a chemical, and most of them are direct contact, but if you do spray a beneficial insect, you're going to kill that beneficial. So read the labels of these products. Anything you use, read the label, make sure you know the timing on it. For any pesticide, especially biorationals, it's better to spray early in the morning than late in the afternoon, because most of your predatory insects and your beneficial insects are mobile, and they move up and down. And at night they go down in the canopy or down in the bottom of the plant, and your pest insects stay up in the canopy. So if you spray early morning, they're going to still be down in that lower part of that plant. The same with the later in the afternoon. They've already moved down for the night. So only use chemical controls as a last resort. Never use them as your kind of your insurance spray, just in case. With that, this is a really helpful resource list that we'll also send out. And I want to say thank you for joining today's